It was one of those nights that leaves a fear I don't ever want to snap out of. The kind of night that settles into your bones, a cold, creeping dread that no amount of daylight can chase away. The kind of fear that makes you question your sanity. Sometimes it's okay to be brave, but maybe choosing peace works better. At least, that's what I told myself that night. I should have chosen peace. The storm raged outside, winds shrieking through the trees, lightning illuminating the sky in jagged flashes. The rain pummeled the roof, a steady drumbeat against the windows. I was used to storms, this wasn't unusual, but there was something about this particular night, something in the air that made everything feel wrong. Like the wind wasn't just howling, but screaming. The trees outside seemed to bend under some unseen force. I couldn't explain it, but I knew in my gut something wasn't right. It wasn't the storm, it was the house. My parents had gone away for the weekend, and I was alone in the house. At first, I loved the idea of having the place to myself. No rules, no one to answer to. I settled in, wrapped in my favorite blanket, the soft glow of the TV filling the room. The familiar sound of the late-night talk show host's voice usually gave me comfort, but tonight, it only added to the unease. The quiet between the thunder and the TV felt heavy, like it was pushing against me, urging me to acknowledge something that was lurking just out of sight. The house was old, built long before we moved in, and it creaked with every gust of wind. The floorboards groaned beneath my feet, and the walls seemed to breathe, shifting in and out with the wind. But tonight, those familiar sounds took on a different quality. The creaks were deeper. The groans were longer. I tried to shake it off. It's just an old house, I kept telling myself. But the unease wouldn't leave. I glanced at the clock on the wall. 12:15 a.m. The hour felt later than it was, the storm outside making it seem as if the world was swallowed whole by the darkness. The house felt too quiet now. I could hear my heartbeat in the silence. I tried to focus on the TV, but the sounds outside and the strange creaks of the house kept pulling my attention away, and then it came. A thump. A clear, unmistakable sound that came from the floor above me. At first I thought it was a branch slamming against the window, or maybe the wind shaking something loose on the roof. But no, it wasn't that. It was a heavy thump, like something... No, someone was walking upstairs. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. It's probably the wind, I thought, trying to reason with myself. Just the house settling. It happens all the time. But then it came again, louder this time. Another thump. It sounded like footsteps. I stood up slowly, pulling the blanket tighter around my shoulders as I stared at the stairs that led to the second floor. The silence stretched, making the moment feel endless, as if the house was holding its breath, waiting for me to make a move. My mind screamed at me to ignore it. It's nothing. You're imagining things, but my feet had already started moving. Slowly, I crept toward the staircase. The creaking of the floor beneath me felt deafening now, each step louder than the last. My hands were clammy, my pulse racing. I couldn't tell if I was scared, because I was alone, or because something in my gut told me that this wasn't just a normal night. That something was in the house with me. The stairs groaned under my weight as I ascended, the darkness above me seeming to stretch endlessly. The hallway at the top was bathed in a dim, flickering light that barely held back the shadows. I didn't want to go any further, but my legs moved on their own accord, pulling me forward like some unseen force was guiding me. As I reached the landing, the sound stopped. I paused. My breath was shallow, my throat tight with fear. Was it gone? Had it just been the wind? But then I heard it again. A low scraping, like something was being dragged across the floor in the attic. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat thickening. I hadn't been up to the attic in months. It was always too dark, too dusty too. Forgotten. I hadn't even thought about it until now. The scraping continued, faint at first, but growing louder as though whatever it was dragging was making its way across the wooden floor, getting closer. My body trembled, a cold sweat breaking out across my skin. I need to check it, I thought, even though my mind screamed, no, don't. But my feet moved, as if controlled by something beyond me. I walked slowly toward the attic door at the end of the hallway. The air felt thick now, heavy, like something was pushing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I reached out for the doorknob, my fingers trembling as they brushed the cool metal. For a brief moment I hesitated. The scraping stopped. And then, just as I started to pull the door open, I heard it again. A voice, soft but unmistakable. It came from above. Gabriel. My blood ran cold. The voice was low, almost like a whisper, but it had a depth to it that sent a chill straight through me. It wasn't my mom's voice. It wasn't anyone I recognized. It was something else. I stepped back instinctively, my heart thudding in my chest. My eyes were glued to the attic door, now wide open, the darkness beyond it seeming to suck the light from the hallway. The voice whispered again, but this time it was different. "Gabriel, come closer." I backed away, stumbling over my own feet. My heart pounded in my ears as I ran back down the hallway, my breath coming in shallow gasps. I had to get out of there. I had to leave. I backed away, stumbling over my own feet. My heart pounded in my ears as I ran back down the hallway, my breath coming in shallow gasps. I had to get out of there. I had to leave. But as I turned to run, I heard a loud bang. The attic door slammed shut on its own. The sound echoed through the house, reverberating in my skull. The force of it made my body freeze. I stood there staring at the door as the silence settled again. I couldn't move. My mind was racing. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. It wasn't just the house, it wasn't just the storm, it was here with me. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, dragging footsteps coming from above me. Not from the attic. From the floor directly above me. Someone or something was walking across the room above my head. I ran down the stairs frantic now, my hands shaking as I tried to open the door to the living room. It wouldn't budge. The door was locked from the outside. Something was pushing against it. No. No. I turned, my chest tight with fear, and started to run toward the back door. The whispering started again, but this time it was coming from behind me. It wasn't in the walls. It wasn't in the attic. It was right there. "Gabriel." I spun around, my breath caught in my throat, but there was nothing. The hallway was empty. My parents' voices. Where are they? I glanced toward the living room window. Dark. There was no one in sight. Then I heard it again. This time closer. So close that it felt like it was right next to me. "Gabriel, we're home." My blood ran cold as I turned toward the stairs. The house felt suffocating now, its weight pressing down on me. I couldn't breathe. I rushed back toward my room and slammed the door behind me, locking it. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. I fumbled for my phone to call my parents, but the screen was black. No signal, no Wi-Fi. The storm outside was now a distant echo, like the whole world had been swallowed up by the darkness. And then I heard it again. "Gabriel." But this time it wasn't from the walls. It was from behind me. I spun around to find my parents standing in the doorway, looking concerned. "We're home early, sweetie. You okay?" My breath caught in my throat as I looked from them to the mirror in the hallway. My reflection. It was grinning. That was when I understood. The house was never empty. It never had been. And it wasn't going to let me go. They say curiosity killed the cat. But sometimes it's not curiosity that gets you. It's the darkness, the silence, and the sound that comes from a place you never thought existed. And believe me, sometimes it's better not to pick up the phone. It was past midnight when I settled into bed, the kind of deep quiet you only get in the dead of night, when the world around you seems to breathe a little slower. My room was dark except for the dim light of the clock, which read 12:13 a.m. It was the perfect time for a peaceful sleep, the kind you get when the rest of the world is still, when there's nothing to worry about. But then my phone buzzed. I ignored it at first, thinking it was just another one of those spam calls. Who calls at midnight, right? But then it buzzed again, and again. Reluctantly, I reached over and grabbed my phone. The screen lit up with an unfamiliar number. I stared at it for a moment, my eyes struggling to adjust to the light. Something inside me told me not to pick it up. Something gnawed at my gut, like an instinct I couldn't explain. But I did anyway. The moment I pressed accept, my heart skipped a beat. Silence. Nothing. No voice. Just static. I waited. I listened. A low hum filled the line, so faint it almost sounded like whispers' voices far away, like they were coming from the depths of a tunnel. I held the phone tighter, my thumb pressing against the screen as if it might somehow help me hear better. The air in the room grew heavier, like someone had switched off the fan, and the temperature seemed to drop in an instant. Then came the whisper, barely audible, like the wind scraping against a window at the edge of a storm. "Help me." I froze. "Help me." The voice was low, hoarse, strained, and something about it made the hairs on my neck stand up. It didn't sound like anyone I knew. And that feeling, the one you get when someone's watching you but you can't see them, crept over me. Slowly, I pulled the phone away from my ear, considering hanging up. But then the whisper came again, more urgent this time. "Please, help me." I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman, the voice so distorted, so warped by whatever was on the other end. My pulse was pounding in my ears now, my fingers trembling as I tried to regain control. "Who is this?" I finally managed to ask, my voice trembling despite myself. The line crackled before the voice responded. I'm in the dark. Please, don't. Hang up. Before I could respond, there was a sudden loud bang. It came from somewhere outside my room. My heart leapt in my chest. I looked toward the window, my mind racing, but there was nothing out there. Only the faint moonlight casting long shadows across the yard. Then, without warning, the voice broke through again, but this time, it was no longer whispering. It was screaming. I'm here. I'm here. Don't hang up. They're coming. They're coming for you. The phone slipped from my grasp as I jerked back, my breath catching in my throat. My hand fumbled in the dark, trying to grab the phone again, but it felt like the room was spinning, like the walls were closing in. A sinking feeling hit me hard in the chest, like something was terribly wrong. I pressed the phone back to my ear, my mind racing with panic. Who's coming? What's going on? I gasped, my voice barely a whisper. The voice on the other end was barely coherent, but the terror in it was palpable. They never stop. Suddenly the connection cut off. Silence again. No hum, no static, nothing. I stared at the phone in disbelief. My mind was scrambling for any logical explanation. I wanted to call the police. I wanted to do something. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was happening, something I couldn't understand. Then, as if on cue, the phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message, not a call. I opened it, half expecting the worst. It's already too late for you. My heart stopped. It was from the same number. I didn't know what to do, but I felt an overwhelming urge to get out of the house. My mind screamed at me to leave, but my legs refused to cooperate. I felt rooted to the spot, every inch of me frozen with fear. That's when I heard it. A knock. It was light at first, like someone tapping on the door, almost playful. But it didn't stop. It became louder, sharper, almost frantic. My eyes darted to the door across the room, my breath catching in my throat. I didn't know who it could be. No one had any reason to be here at this hour. And the knock didn't stop. I slowly rose from the bed, my legs weak beneath me, as I approached the door. My hand trembled as it hovered over the doorknob. I didn't want to open it, but I had to know what was on the other side. I had to know who or what was knocking. I opened it. Nothing. The hallway outside my room was empty. No one there. No sound. Just the cold, quiet space that led to nowhere. But then I looked down and my stomach twisted. A single small piece of paper lay on the floor in front of me, as though it had been slipped under the door. I bent down, my hands shaking violently, and picked it up. The handwriting was barely legible, but I could make out the words. They never stop. You'll never leave. You already answered the call. As I read the words, the door behind me slammed shut. I spun around, but it wasn't the wind. It was something pushing the door closed. And there, standing in the dark corner of the room, was the same whispering voice from the phone. Only this time I saw them, eyes wide, pale, skin drawn tight over their skull, their face twisted in pain and desperation. Their lips parted as if they wanted to scream, but no sound came out. They had been waiting for me. And that was when I understood. There was never a call. There was never any wrong number. It had always been me. They had always been here. And the real question was, what would happen now that I had picked up? The last thing I saw before the world turned to black was a thin hand reaching out toward me. There's a quiet fear that settles inside you when you realize you're being watched. It's not the fear of the unknown, the fear of what's in the dark. It's the kind of fear that twists your gut into knots because the thing that's watching you is real. And it's not hiding in the shadows or lurking behind closed doors. It's right there in plain sight, patiently waiting for you to notice, waiting for the exact moment when you can no longer ignore it. That's when the nightmare begins. It all started on an ordinary Tuesday. I had just moved into my new apartment in the city, a small one-bedroom unit on the third floor of an old building that had seen better days. The wood creaked beneath my feet and the paint was chipped along the corners. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I had spent weeks sorting through boxes, organizing the bare essentials, and setting up a space where I could finally settle in. The world outside seemed like a distant memory, a faded blur of stress and hurried decisions. For once I was free, in control. But even in the comfort of that new beginning, a sense of unease lingered in the air, like a faint whisper I couldn't quite understand. The first few days went by without incident. I'd leave for work in the mornings, return in the evening, and repeat the routine. The apartment was quiet, peaceful even. But there was something strange about the stillness. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was always this subtle pressure in the air, a sensation that made my skin prickle. Then, on the fourth night, it started. I had just finished my dinner and was lounging on the couch with a book when I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. A flicker of movement across the window, barely noticeable. For a moment, I thought it was the reflection of the streetlights or the sway of the trees in the breeze. But then it happened again. A shadow, a figure, a person. I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest. I peeked out from behind the curtains, trying to catch a glimpse of who it was. But all I saw was the dark, empty street below. No one was there. Just your imagination, I told myself. Get a grip. But that wasn't the last time. Over the next few days, I started seeing those shadows more often, each time more distinct. They would dart across my window at odd hours, always at night, always when I least expected it. At first, I dismissed it as nothing. Maybe it was a neighbor or someone walking their dog, I thought. But the feeling didn't go away. It grew. The sensation that someone was watching me from the shadows, just beyond my line of sight, was too real to ignore. The worst part? It wasn't just the shadows outside, it was the feeling of someone inside the apartment with me. A presence. I would walk into a room and feel it, like the air was thicker there, heavy with something unspoken. Sometimes I'd hear a soft creak of the floorboards when I was home alone, or a faint whisper so low I could barely make it out. Stop it. You're being paranoid. That's what I kept telling myself, over and over. But then, one night, it happened. I had just gotten out of the shower, wrapped in a towel, my hair damp against my neck, when I saw something I couldn't ignore. I walked into the living room, my footsteps muffled by the carpet, and froze in my tracks. The couch was slightly askew, not how I had left it. The pillow on the armrest, the one I always placed in the corner, was gone. I stood there, my heart racing, trying to calm myself. Maybe I had moved it earlier without thinking. Maybe I had bumped the couch by accident. But as I walked toward the spot where the pillow should have been, I noticed something else. A single strand of dark hair. It wasn't mine. My hair was blonde, fine, and straight. This was thick, black, and coiled at the end as if someone had been here, sitting on the couch watching me. My breath caught in my throat. I bent down to pick it up, my hands shaking, but I couldn't help the dread that crept up my spine. I was not alone. I hadn't been alone for a while. I thought about calling the police. But what would I say? Someone's been in my apartment, but I have no evidence and no idea who it is. I wasn't sure what I was afraid of, being laughed at or being dismissed. Or worse, what if they did nothing? What if it was all in my head? I didn't sleep that night. I spent the hours staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself that I was just imagining things, that it was some bizarre coincidence. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The next day, I decided to take action. I started looking around the apartment, checking the locks on the windows and doors, searching for any sign of a break-in. There was nothing, no sign of forced entry. But then I noticed something else, something that made my blood run cold. My bedroom window. I hadn't remembered closing it when I left that morning, but now, as I stood by the edge of my bed, I realized it was wide open. The cold air from outside filled the room, swirling around the room as if something had been in here, moving around, lingering. I closed the window quickly, my hands trembling, and locked it. But I couldn't shake the thought that someone had been in my room. Someone had been watching me sleep. The days blurred together after that. I couldn't focus at work, couldn't concentrate on anything. Every time I returned to my apartment, I felt the same knot in my stomach, the same unsettling presence in the air. It was getting worse. I began seeing more shadows, more movement. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't relax. I started double-checking the locks every time I left, but that didn't stop the growing feeling that someone was waiting, biding their time and getting closer. Then, one evening, I came home to find a note on my kitchen table. "I see you." It was written in bold black letters, the words slashed across the page like a warning. My blood ran cold. I turned in a circle as if expecting the person to be standing behind me, but there was nothing. "I see you." The words echoed in my mind. Whoever this was, they knew me. They knew my routines, my habits. They had been in my home, and now they were getting bolder. I didn't know who to turn to. I had no evidence, no witnesses. The police would think I was crazy, and then something worse happened. I started receiving calls, strange calls in the middle of the night. The kind where no one says anything, but you know someone is on the other end, just listening. I'd pick up the phone only to hear my own breathing echoing back at me. Sometimes I'd hear faint whispers, like someone was standing just outside my door, their words muffled by distance. But every time I tried to speak, the voice would cut off, leaving only silence. It was driving me mad. I started installing security cameras around the apartment, hoping to catch a glimpse of whoever was tormenting me. But every time I checked the footage, I saw nothing. Just the stillness of an empty room, the quiet of an ordinary evening. Then one night, everything changed. I came home late from work, exhausted. I unlocked the door, pushed it open, and stepped inside. But the moment I did, something felt off. The air was heavier, thicker, as if someone had been waiting in the dark, watching me. I reached for the light switch, but before I could turn it on, I froze. There, in the corner of the room, standing just behind the couch, was a figure, a man. He was tall, dressed in black, his face hidden in the shadows. He didn't move, didn't make a sound, but I could feel his presence, his eyes trained on me, waiting for me to react. I couldn't breathe. My legs were frozen in place, my mind screaming for me to run, but my body refused to obey. I reached slowly for my phone, my hands shaking violently. But just as I was about to dial the police, the man stepped forward. His face was obscured by a mask, but I could see his eyes, cold, unfeeling, like a predator stalking its prey. And then, with a voice as calm as if we were having a normal conversation, he spoke. "You shouldn't have moved here." And then, everything went black. I woke up hours later, lying on the floor. The apartment was silent, empty. There was no sign of the man, no trace of his presence, but the sense of dread was still there, lingering in the air, suffocating me. I don't know who he is, I don't know why he's doing this. But one thing is certain, he's still out there, watching, waiting, and I can't shake the feeling that he's getting closer. The stalker is always watching, always waiting for you to slip up, always closer than you think.